Now we're going to check if there are any errors. In that case, we're going to print an error message. Otherwise, we're going to create a query, run the query, and check if the query has been successful. If it's not successful, then we're going to show an error message again. All right. So now let's check if there is an error and print an error message. So there is an error if the errors variable is not empty. So you can just check that like this. So if that's the case, then we're going to place all those paragraphs that we added inside the errors variable. We're going to place them inside a div and add some styling to that div. So let's create a variable result message. So it's going to be a div, and then inside the div, we're going to place our paragraphs. Okay, so to style it, let's add a couple of classes. So make sure you use single quotes inside because I'm using double quotes outside. So I'm going to add the alert class and the alert danger class. All right, so, and then we're going to echo this variable. So once we do that, that means that the file is returning something. And when we go back to the Ajax call, then that's going to be true. Okay. And this means that we're going to show the error message inside the attrib message. All right. Now we're going to have an else statement, meaning that we have no errors. So first of all, if we have no errors, we're going to prepare our variables to the query. So the variables we really need to prepare for the query are mainly the departure and destination. Everything else we actually don't need to prepare it for the query because we checked that this is only digits, okay, both the price and the seats, and everything else is quite straightforward. These are only checked. Okay, so the values are well known for us. These are also checked, so there is nothing that the user is going to type manually. Okay, apart from these two, and we have already checked that there are only digits inside. Okay, so the only ones we're going to be checking are the departure and destination. So we're going to go to the departure variable and replace it by the prepared version. So you're going to use the function mysqli underscore real escape string, which will take a couple of parameters, the connection variable and the old departure. Okay, so now our departure is prepared for the query. We're going to do the same thing for the destination, and it's now prepared for the query. Now, before we run the query, we're going to check if we have a regular trip or a one-off trip. So for each case, we're going to have a different query. So let's start with the regular case. So the regular case means that the value of regular is y. Okay. Then we're going to have a query for a regular trip. Else, we're going to have a query for a one-off trip. Okay. So let's define the table name. Just for consistency, I'm going to use capital N right there, the camel case way. So our table is called car share trips. Okay, so let's create the query and place it inside a variable SQL. So what we're going to be doing here, we're going to insert a new record inside our table. All right. So we're going to take all the inputs of the user for a regular trip. So that means all these ones plus the regular radio button, the weekdays, and the time. So we're going to insert into our table. So we're going to specify here the columns that we're going to be inserting into, and then we're going to have the values straight after. All right, so let's start with the columns. So we're going to start with the user ID. Okay, then the departure, then departure, longitude, departure, latitude, destination, then the price, then seats available, then regular. Okay, and then we're going to have all the week days, okay, because we have a regular case here, then the time. Okay, now the values are going to be the corresponding values for all of these. So the user ID is the user, okay, the connected user. So we can get the user ID from the session variables. So let's define a variable user ID and just access the user ID from the session. Okay. So that's the user ID. The departure is going to be that one. And then the departure, longitude and latitude. Just make sure you follow the right order here. And then the destination. Then destination. And then the price. Then seats available. Then regular. And then the weekdays. Okay, so we're going to have each one of these. And then the time. Okay, and now we've got all our values. All right. So that's our query for a regular trip. The query for a one-off trip is more or less similar. Okay, so we're just going to remove all the weekdays. And we're going to replace them with the date. All right. Now we're going to run the query and store the results inside a results variable. So again, we're going to use the MySQLi query function, which takes the connection link, the connection variable, and the query in the parameters. So now we're going to check if the query is successful. So you're going to check if it's not successful. So you're going to check the opposite of results. If that's the case, we're going to echo an error message. Saying something like, there was an error. The trip could not be added to the database. And let's add the alerts and alerts danger classes. Okay, so let's save. So before we move on, let's just have a quick look at our code and make sure that everything is okay. I can see something there. The price is outside the quotes. Okay. And also, if I just go back to the break match function, the price needs to be inside the function as well, like that. And we need to do the same thing for the seats available. Okay, so let's save. Okay, I've got another one in this line. So just add an extra and. Okay, we don't need that. All right, now let's test our code. So to start, I'm going to submit an empty form just to make sure that we get the right error messages. Okay, so as expected, we can see the error messages corresponding to a missing departure, destination, price, seats available, and frequency. So now if we select the frequency and we don't select any weekdays and we don't input any time. Okay, that's correct. Perfect. Okay. All right. So let's input a wrong destination. Perfect. So let's try a one-off trip without a date. Great. All right, so now let's try something with correct data. Okay, so let's submit. And let's have a quick look at our table. Okay, so you've got one record there. Okay, so you've got the departure from Berlin going to Paris. We got the longitude and latitude of the departure. Same for the destination. Okay, and we can see the date and time as well. Okay, so it works. Let's try another one. Let's increase the price slightly. And let's make this one a regular just for testing. Okay, so let's create a trip. So normally we would need to hide the module. We haven't done that yet, but it's okay. So you just want to check now the table and make sure that everything works. Okay, and we've got the new record there. We've got the right user ID. it's a regular trip. So it's a Y, and it's Monday and Tuesday. And the time, okay, we've got the time as well. Okay, perfect. So our code works. All right, now let's go back to our JavaScript file and just make sure that we hide the module once we submit the form and everything is okay. And also we need to make sure that we empty the error div, okay, if everything is successful. And also we're going to reset our form once we submit the form. So we were supposed to do all of this right there. So to hide the module, we're going to select the module using its ID. So the ID of the module was our trip module. Okay, so to hide it, we're going to use the module method and we're going to give it a parameter hide. Okay, to reset the form, we're going to select the form using its ID. So the ID of the form was our trip form. And to hide it or to reset it, we're going to need to use the reset method, but we can't use it straight away. We're going to need to go to the element of index 0 first. Okay, so it's a bit different than using the get elements by ID, which we can use straight with JavaScript. But since we're using jQuery, that's the correct way of using the reset method, like that. Okay, and then finally, to load the trips, we're going to need to define a function. I'm going to call it getTrips. Okay, but for now, we haven't defined that function yet. Okay, so we're going to need to come back to this function later and define it. So just to avoid any errors, I'm just going to define an empty function for now. So we're going to use this function right there, and also we're going to use it when we load the page, okay, from scratch. All right, so let's save and try our code again. Okay, before I move on, I'm just going to change the title of this page to My Trips instead of My Notes. That's better. Okay. Okay, so we are ready to test this code. So let's refresh the page, add a new trip. So let's try something. Okay. So let's make it a one-off. Okay. So our module disappeared. And if I open the module again, you can see that the form has been reset. All right. So now let's have a look at the database and see if you've got a new record there. Perfect. As expected, we can see that everything is fine and we've got all our data in there. All right. In the next video, we're going to create the getTrips function, which will send an AJAX call to the getTrips PHP file and retrieve all the trips from the database.